Hello and welcome to My Movember Menu, a cooking show for Movember. And I can already hear you asking, why? Well, Movember is a charity looking at men's health, both physically and mentally, and equally cooking is something that we use to not only feed us, but equally to keep us healthy. If we eat healthily, we generally speaking are healthy. But Movember also focuses on mental health. And for me, I find cooking a brilliant way of relaxing and unwinding after a stressful day of coursework, because I'm a student and this is actually being filmed in my hall's bedroom with a small kitchenette tagged on the side, because I couldn't find a professional kitchen or indeed a camera crew that would film this. So I've kind of got a camera propped up on some boxes and literally the smallest kitchen set you will ever see outside of Fisher-Price. But nonetheless, we're going to try and make a cooking show. And I figured what better way to start it off than with a recipe that always ends in an argument, especially if you're Italian. And that recipe is spaghetti bolognese. Now, as any Italian will tell you, the way that anyone else cooks spaghetti bolognese is, generally speaking, wrong. So I decided to cut out the middleman, find an Italian, and get a recipe from him. And big up to my friend Fabio for giving me his recipe for this. And his recipe starts with 500 grams of minced beef, 250 grams of minced pork, yeah, I didn't think of that either, one large onion, which we're going to cut finely, one large carrot, once again chopped finely, and one stalk of celery, also cut finely. We're going to fry off the vegetables, fry off the meat, stick it in. I'm going to stick it in my slow cooker because I'm going to bugger off and do some coursework in a minute. And then going to chuck in some passata, some lovely, very finely chopped and blended tomatoes, a little bit of basil and oregano, or oregano if you're American, pronounce it properly. A dash of red wine, because is it cooking if you're not drinking? And this, which is actually, it's a European sort of seasoning. It's vegetable seasoning. It contains a little bit of garlic and a variety of other vegetable herbs and such like. I quite like using it, adds a brilliant amount of flavour. Usually it's called Vegeta, this stuff is called kucharek. You can find it in Tesco's, it's usually on the European aisle. So first thing we're going to have to start with is we're going to have to cut up the vegetables. And this is going to be a brilliant chance for me to look like a muppet on camera immediately. Because when I'm cutting onions, I like to wear onion goggles. It stops me from crying, because that's what onions do. I can't remember, there's a reason why onions do it. I just don't know what that reason is, so let's get everything out of the way. Oh. So, cutting an onion, try and get it into the camera, there we go. One onion here, one large brown onion. First thing first, obviously you've got to get rid of the paper sort of skin that goes with it. We'll just put that there. I should point out that I am usually a radio DJ and by no means am I a properly trained chef, but the fact of the matter is I really enjoy cooking and I do find it a brilliant way of relaxing, especially if you sort of like to emulate Gordon Ramsay in it. You can really get a lot of stress out by swearing at your vegetables as you prepare them. So get that out of the way, sweep that onto the floor because we'll just hoover it up later. Okay, one nearly ready to work with onion. I'm going to start at the bottom and we're going to just slice off that bit there, and as we cut it we're going to leave a little bit at the edge, just whip it round. That makes it easier just to peel off the rest of the onion. Then this outer layer just comes off. This bit sometimes gets a bit tough when it's being cooked, so it's always good to take that outer edge off. Then obviously we'll take the top off the onion, like that. The rest of it we'll be left with one nice clean onion to cook with. And then what we need to do is we need to chop it finely, so we're going to go in half, like this. Now there are a variety of different ways of cutting an onion. Most chefs will have their own sort of specific method. What we're going to simply do is we're just going to make a long line of cuts all the way down here. Turn the onion, reset everything, and then just simply run the knife through the onion like that. Once we get to this end bit and it gets a bit small, flip it on its side, you've got a bigger bit to hold on to. And there we go, one fairly coarsely but diced onion. We'll do the same to the second half. obviously watch out for your fingers, because well, everyone likes to have 10. If you've got more than that, well, actually we better not go there. Probably from Norfolk. So, 1 lightly diced onion. What we're going to do is we're going to then transfer this with a little bit of olive oil to a pan that I've got heating up on the hob here. Olive oil goes in, and we'll go and stick these onions in. So while the onions start to get warm, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the carrot next. Actually no, we'll go for the celery next. I very rarely cook with celery, so what you're going to see here is my first attempt ever at really preparing celery. Fun. Obviously we're going to have to wash it. This is very farm fresh, still got a bit of dirt on it, so we'll give this a rinse. And now we have our nice clean celery, wet hands. Oh well. So, only really going to need, I think, according to the recipe, 2 stalks of finely cut celery. We can put the rest of that back outside of camera. We'll tidy up the ends here. There we go. And then what we need to do is finely chop it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the knife through the middle of the celery, just to split it down the middle, and then line it up here. And what we can do is we can just simply make loads of really small slices. That slice was very small. There we go. So, some fairly finely chopped celery. There we go. And the celery will transfer to the pan with the onions. So, next up is, well, with most Italian dishes, what they contain a huge amount of is garlic. So, just reach into my cupboard, there's some... There we go, garlic. Just going to use the last of the cloves off of this bulb here. That'll be plenty. So what we're going to do is we'll set 1 clove aside, we'll put that in when we do the meat. We'll start with these 2 cloves here to go in with the vegetables. Easy way of peeling garlic is put the knife over it, whack it. What it does, it just breaks it a little bit. We've got a slight bruise on this bit, so we'll cut that out. And it makes it a lot easier to peel off the sort of dry skin. There are probably better ways of doing it, but violence is cathartic. Give it a whack. So we'll get rid of this slightly bruised and manky bit. Chop off the base of it, and then once again just finely chop our garlic. Is it Goodfellas, the film, where they're talking about making pasta and the guy chops it so fine it's like glass and it sort of just melts in the oil? I can't remember. That's a film to go and watch, I suppose. But yeah, there we go. A little bit of nicely finely chopped garlic. I'm going to stick this in the pan with the onions and the celery. So next up is the carrot. Much like the celery, I suppose we ought to really wash this to get it nice and fresh. This one, really nice, fresh, very firm carrot. One nice and clean carrot. What we're going to do is there's a slight bit of bruising to this bottom end here, so we'll take that off. And we'll take off where the stem was. And then got one nice ready to work with carrot. Bear with the wobbly camera while we split the carrot. There we go. So we'll halve the carrot, makes it a bit easier to work with, not rolling around so much. And then once again, if we're going to finely chop it, just make each half into thirds. Roughly, that wasn't very good. And then what we're going to do is once again simply just make some very fine slices. The brilliant thing about carrots is they contain a huge amount of natural sugars, And often when you cook tomatoes, especially with like passata or if you're using chopped tin tomatoes, they can be slightly bitter. The natural sweetness of a carrot will help to balance that out. That's some actual cooking advice there. Don't think that the whole show is going to be full of like genuine cooking advice or indeed brilliant technique. This is very poor cutting technique, as I'm sure any professional chef would be able to tell me. You're supposed the way I know you're supposed to cut is you're supposed to cut with, effectively, I'll try and get my fingers in, like this, with your index and your ring finger pushed together, your middle finger on top of it. And what this gives you is a protective barrier of your middle finger when you're cutting. The knuckle of there stops you cutting your own fingers off. And it takes practice to get used to it. I've never practiced it. Hence why I cut with the gay abandon someone who could probably lose a finger or two. There we go, so we have our relatively finely chopped carrot and the onions are just starting to cook down, so we'll give those a quick stir. So in here we've already got our garlic, our onions and our celery. Oil is starting to come up to temperature. So we'll just leave those to start to brown off, then we'll add in the carrots. Okay, so now we've got the vegetables simmering away quite nicely. They've been in there with the oil, the garlic, and obviously we've got the onions, carrots and celery in there. We'll just give that a little stir. And they're going to simmer away quite nicely. The onions are going nice and glossy and the carrots are starting to soften up, which is what we're looking for, really. Now, if you're cooking this normally, if you're just cooking this of an evening, ready for dinner, what you do is you'd leave those in there and then you'd chuck in your lovely minced meats. We've got beef and pork, 500 and 250 grams of each. But because I'm sort of different and I really like using something called a slow cooker, this little device over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer the vegetables into my slow cooker, which I've had preheating, so that's nice and warm, and then what we'll do is we'll cook the beef. Okay, so we've got our vegetables now in our slow cooker. They're going to keep sort of cooking through, and what this is going to do is means I can disappear for 6 and a bit hours, get a load of coursework done because, well, student, and I mean this is great if you're going out to work. You can sort of prepare all your ingredients the night before, stick it all in a slow cooker, turn it on, go off to work, come back in at whatever time you get in from work, dinner is ready, all you got to do is boil some pasta, get some potatoes ready. Absolutely fantastic. I love mine, can't recommend getting one enough. So we're going to keep our pan over here back on the heat and just chuck in a little bit more olive oil. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare our final clove of garlic. I don't know how much well you can see that on camera. Little clove of garlic. And that's just going to add a little bit of flavour to the beef and the pork. This one looks quite dry and old. Actually, this one looks pretty shit, so well, I can't say that on camera. This one looks pretty awful. In fact, this little piece of garlic here has been sitting in the cupboard for way too long, quite dry, so it's alright. We've got, for some reason, of all the ingredients I keep in stock in my kitchen, I always seem to have a huge amount of garlic. I cook with it quite a lot, always making pasta dishes. So we'll get another bowl of garlic out. There we go. Out, there we go. So, fresh clove of garlic. Under the knife, give it a whack. And what does it? Really nice. So, that into the pan. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stick in our 250 grams of minced pork over here, 500 grams of minced beef. So we've now got our meat sizzling away nicely in a pan, and this is always a good time to season it. What I like to season when I'm making an Italian dish like a Bolognese, can't go wrong with a bit of oregano and a little bit of basil as well. Helps to really bring out the flavour, makes it quite Italian tasting. Okay, so we've chucked in a little bit of seasoning. The next and one of the most important things, especially when we're making a Bolognese, it's a really nice tomatoey smooth sauce. We've got passata. How the hell do we get into this? Let's see. And now we've got lovely passata. We're just going to pour this in with the beef. Just A, keeps it moist, and B, it's just sort of a good way of starting the sauce off. There we go. Now I've used 500 grams of passata. You can obviously adjust it if you're not cooking quite as much as I am. This is a 3.5 litre slow cooker, so I can cram a hell of a lot of Bolognese in there. So it makes sense to me to make a lot more. The brilliant part is, once you've made it, you can obviously have a portion of dinner. Let's stick the rest of it in the freezer, and you've got easy meals throughout the week. Something nice, fresh, home cooked. Well, I say fresh, it's frozen, and you're kind of fresh frozen. Something nice and home cooked, and really easy to get out. Now we'll just stir that through with the beef. And already, just with the passata and the beef in the pan, it is starting to look like a Bolognese. I'll come around and grab the camera and I'll show you. Here we go. So, there we go. We've got our sort of the minced beef and the minced pork just sitting in the passata with a little bit of basil and a little bit of oregano and 1 clove of garlic in there. And we'll just leave them to simmer away for a minute until the beef starts to just cook down, and then we'll transfer it to the slow cooker. I'm going to stay on there. There we go. And now for the final ingredient to go into the dish. We'll add a little bit of the couture seasoning in a minute, but for me it is wine. Is it really cooking if you're not drinking? Unfortunately it is 2:05 in the afternoon, so it's probably a bit early to crack open the wine for me, but one thing I love doing when I'm cooking is you can really throw a bit of flavour into food by adding a little bit of wine, or sometimes even beers. They're really good for cooking with. What I've got here is a very cheap bottle of red wine. It's a Montepulciano from Tesco's, and it cost me, I don't know if that's going to focus, a grand total of £6 earlier today. But it's nice wine and goes very well with sort of tomatoey sauces if you're making Bolognese, for instance. Absolutely fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a healthy little glug to the beef. And we'll stir that through, and the best part is there's still a lot of wine left to drink this evening. And one of the most important steps is obviously properly seasoning your food. We've added in a little bit of oregano and basil, but we're also going to chuck in a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Obviously you can adjust this to taste. I like a little bit of a peppery kick in my food, so I'm going to add quite a lot of freshly ground black pepper. Okay, so as we can see, we've got the beef and the pork in the tomato passata with a dash of red wine in there. Got our oregano, basil and garlic, and that's cooking away nicely. What we're going to do now is we're going to transfer it into, well, in my case we're going to transfer it into the slow cooker where we've got the onions, carrots and celery. They've just been sitting in there while we've got the beef ready. So we'll take the heat away from the beef and just grab, so let's move the pan with, here we go. Don't know how I'm going to do this one-handed because I'm both camera operator and chef. Let's see.
let's give this a stir. So as you can see, it's nice and thick, and the beef and the pork have mixed right the way through there. They'll have taken on the flavour of the herbs and the garlic, and there we go. And equally, the flavour of the beef and the pork will have spread into the tomatoey sauce as well. So, give that a stir. Pop the spatula to one side. And we're going to try and pick this up very carefully and dump it all into the slow cooker. Just like that. And then we'll just stir this all through. There we go. Back in there, grab the lid for slow cooker. Lid goes on, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for 6 hours while I go and get some coursework done. And in the meantime, yeah. Obviously, if you were cooking this ready for one evening, you would just keep it in that pan and just keep stirring it through. You'd add the vegetables back in, stirring it through, boil off some pasta, which we'll come to later. Okay, so it's been 5.5 hours, yeah. And the slow cooker here has been bubbling away quite nicely all that time. I've given it a little stir as I've just got back in. Smells absolutely fantastic, looks beautiful as well. And we're on to the final stage of making spaghetti bolognese. And it's the sort of other half of spaghetti bolognese, the spaghetti. What I've got here is just the Napolina spaghetti. Not a brand shout out, it's what I had in the cupboard. And we're just going to boil it. If you do have time, plan far enough ahead, if you know you're going to use up the entire crock pot worth either in a day or for lunches or something, you can put your pasta in the slow cooker as well, the actual pasta itself, in with the sauce. It'll just cook through nicely, makes it nice and soft. But because most of that's probably going to go in the freezer in little boxes and baggies, there's no point putting the pasta in. So what we're going to do is boil the pasta. And the way to do that properly is salt in the saucepan, add boiling water, make sure it's simmering, then add the pasta. The saucepan in question is there. Sorry about the sitting down piece to camera thing. Yeah, that's the saucepan. If I was doing this properly, we'd have a sort of tall saucepan that you could fit the entire spaghetti in lengthways. But I don't have one of those because I'm a student on a budget cooking in my bedroom. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the saucepan. Pasta's going to go into that in just a second. I don't know what the rules are on measuring out pasta. If you're doing it like penne or like rigatoni or something, generally speaking a mug works quite well per person. Spaghetti in its dry state, you can't really have one mug full of that. Or if you do, it's going to be a very big portion. I'm dropping it all over the floor. So instead what I've gone for is roughly sort of that much. I'm trying to get this into camera. There we go. Is the camera going to pick that up? Yeah, so what I've gone for is sort of a whole thumb across to one knuckle. That much pasta. And that's it, it's pasta, it's not too tricky to cook. It's going in some salted water and it's going to boil till it's just al dente, which means to the bite. Bit of Italian for you. Okay, the age-old discussion of what to do with a pasta pot that's bubbling over like this. Well, number one instinct would be to turn it down. Where's the knob? There it is. So, take it down to 2. That should keep things simmering away nicely. And one other trick that is supposed to work is partly lifting the lid off. This saucepan lid balances quite nicely like that. We'll want the extractor fan on though, so I'm going to have to shout over the sound of the extractor fan, and that will keep the pasta bubbling away quite nicely. The other method that's supposed to work to stop pasta bubbling up like this is to just add a drop or two of olive oil to the top of the water. And I think it's something to do with the density and the surface tension. It holds it together and stops it foaming up like this. So we'll just grab the lid quickly. And we'll grab the olive oil, there we go. And we'll just add a drop to the top of the water there. And leave that to just swirl it around a bit with the fork. So now the oil is sitting on top of the water and it's going to sort of disrupt the bubbling and the foaming. And then we should be able to pop the lid back on. And fingers crossed that won't start to foam up. Okay, so our pasta is now cooked. It's been bubbling away quite nicely. It's now soft, but there's still a little bit of firmness to it, which is sort of what you want with al dente. So the next thing is we've got to obviously strain it off, stick it on a plate, and add our Bolognese sauce, which is still bubbling away nicely. So for this you'll need one colander. This is a colander, it's got holes in it, see? And I'm simply just going to pour pasta into it. Like I said, cooking pasta isn't tricky, really. So we've got our lovely steaming pasta, and all we're simply going to do is take one plate and apply pasta. Stage 1 done. Stage 2 is now the liberal application of our Bolognese sauce. This depends on how much you want, but I'm going to be applying quite a lot because I'm very hungry. So, lid comes off, we'll turn that off, just make sure the steam is there. Give it a quick stir. Actually, if I... there we are. If I just grab the camera, 1 second, I'll be able to show you what that looks like. That's the sort of consistency you're looking for. Nice sort of reddish brown with bits of carrot and celery floating around in it. There we go. Camera back down on the box. Right, so spaghetti, ladle, spaghetti bolognese, properly Italian way. And now comes the most important part of making spaghetti bolognese, eating spaghetti bolognese. Now, I could be wrong here in thinking this, but I think it's an Italian tradition or sort of faux pas to add seasoning or cheese or something to your food without tasting it first, so dig in. Steaming hot. Damn, that's good. That tastes like proper Italian bolognese. There's no ridiculous extra flavour, no over flavouring of the meat. It is very simple, very delicious, and very Moorish. However, it does need one thing.